Okay, welcome to the Slate Belt Heritage Center. Tonight we are presenting our Historic Preservation Award Program, one of the favorite things that we do throughout the year. When we acknowledge a number of people who are working outside the walls of the museum and doing in some way a piece of work that will preserve Slate Belt heritage, whether that's working on a historic structure or volunteering their time for a particular project or preserving a body of knowledge. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Slate Belt Heritage Center, we're located at 30 North 1st Street in Bangor in the heart of the historic district. And we are open weekends throughout the summer from April until October, and on Sundays through the rest of the year from noon to 3. So we are open. We are still doing our programs virtually, which is what we're recording tonight. So I'm delighted to be able to introduce Jason Huggin, who is a member of our Board of Trustees, and he will be making the presentations tonight. Jason.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Preservation Award for 2021. Welcome award winners.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So tonight I'm going to read off the winners, and I'll introduce them, and then we'll go ahead and let them go ahead and talk about their projects they completed during the year. So first up, we have Cindy Smith and Carol Hoff. They won for the Initiative Award for 2021, presented to an individual, or in this case, a group who has shown exemplary actions in promoting and preserving the heritage of the Slate Belt through in-kind actions. Promote and preserve the culture and heritage of the Slate Belt. Carol and Cindy won the award for documenting and categorizing all the 300 tombstones in the Scots-Irish Cemetery in Lower Mount Bethel Township. They are lauded as the oldest public cemetery in the township and the resting place of many veterans in the Revolutionary War. A definition of full and productive life must include service to others. Through their many laudable actions and deeds, they have proven themselves to be assets of their community and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And what I'm reading off of is actually the award and certificate you'll be getting from the House of Representatives from Mario Scabello in his office. I'll be dropping it off this weekend to everybody. So Carol and Cindy, why don't you go ahead and tell us about the book and what you guys did for the cemetery.
Well, first of all, Carol took pictures down at the cemetery and cleaned a lot of the stones and then took the pictures and then put them on Facebook. Now,
Find a grave.
Find a grave. Oh, I do that all the time. Find a grave. Lib Bush, who was president of the Hunter Martin settlement, approached me one Sunday morning and said, I have all these pictures on a thumb drive. If we go to Staples and get them all printed out, do you think you could help make some kind of a binder, some kind of a book? Well, here's the size of the book that got made. It's a 5-inch binder. And what we did was identify the pictures. I'll just flip some of these over and put a reference number from the book that everything is printed in, which was the Scotch-Irish of Northampton County that Northampton County Historical Society published back in the 20s, I really think. Also, Lib had put a row number on every, on all of the rows. So we were able to identify the person's name and the reference number from the book, and also the row number where that gravestone can be found. What's so nice about this book now is that we can keep it at the museum, and when people stop at the museum or write a letter, we very quickly can find that grave in the cemetery. And so thank you, COVID-19, for quarantine, because that gave me lots of free time. I'm sitting at home and was able to put this thing together. So Carol, why don't you talk about a minute about cleaning all those stones and taking the pictures?
Yeah, we did get involved with doing that. mostly because of Libby. She had, I guess, never thought that there would be documentation for the cemetery. And she had talked to Dave and Charlotte Morris, and she had also talked to John O'Brien, who does cemetery restoration, very much involved with repairing the stones. Most of you probably know him. And we had kind of started cleaning the stones, and he was involved with Dave Morris with resetting some of the stones, ones that had fallen over, and putting them up. So we were trying to get them cleaned. And if anybody's been down that way, you will notice a lot of white stones that are currently in the cemetery because of I don't want to say chemical because it's a natural cleaning agent that was advised to be used called D2. And you basically spray it on and you can clean it. And over time, they really sparkle. So a lot of stones, we actually found some that Liv didn't know she even had, weren't on her list, or she thought weren't even there. And after cleaning some of them, and which became much more, able to be seen, the lettering and stuff with the light. So, she was so excited just doing that. And Dave and Charlotte got involved because they were looking for a Morris relative on Dave's side that was buried under a tree that we had to kind of cut all the the pine area away from it to find the stone. And but we spent a lot of time. My granddaughter got involved and stuff like that, and we spent a lot of time just cleaning them and then taking them in the best light and giving the copies to Liv so that she could put them, in the book. And she was just so proud of the fact that she actually had documentation of her cemetery, and the stones that were in there. So, and then I took the time to download those same pictures, as Cindy said, to find a grave. There were I think 40 or so requests, and people were just kind of shocked with the Revolutionary War ones, and some of them that were still so good that you could actually, either from cleaning or the light, that you could read and stuff that were ancestors. So that was kind of very gratifying just for that reasoning, that they don't get forgotten, and so it's nice to be able to, at least from my perspective, I like seeing that when I did my own and found my own. So I think it's a really nice thing for posterity, because you don't know how long these stones are going to be there, especially the really old ones that are wearing. So, it was really nice to do. I know there's still some repair work to do there, but we did get a lot of them done.
Got a lot done.
Yeah.
Do you know the exact number of stones? I thought it was more than 300 and something.
Yeah, I thought it was, but without going on Find a Grave, I wouldn't know off the top
Yeah.
of my head. I know it's over 300. I'm just not sure. I know there's a number of Revolutionary War veterans there. There is a couple Civil War veterans that are also in the cemetery. And then I think your latest ones are up to the early 1900s, either late 1800s, 1890s, or early 1900s. So somewhere in there is your last ones that
Yeah.
we know of that were buried. So
One thing we were able to do also is to properly identify some stones that had been misidentified when the graveyard was read maybe back in the 20s. And that was really a gratifying piece. Was like, wait a minute, this child's name is, that something else. And be able to match those families up on Find a Grave. So some of those kind of things. It was a very satisfying program or project
Yes.
to work on.
yes.
Yeah. So thank you, Carol. It was just, I just met Carol last summer. I had seen her name on Find a Grave a lot as a person who takes a lot of pictures in the cemeteries around the Mount Bethel area. So it was nice to meet Carol and work with her on this project.
Yeah, we had a good time.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, and a very good project for to preserve that for future generations to take
Yes.
apart. And
Exactly. And
appreciate.
if you go out to the Hunter Martin Museum and see the Scotch Irish Cemetery out there, those stones look fabulous. They're cleaned, they're white, they sparkle.
Yes.
And those are the ones that I was just out there today, and some of them are still black, but I think that's because of the kind of stone they are.
Well, yeah, some of the old knob ones, I don't know what exactly they are, but they're like the knobby, I call them the knobby ones because they go like the very old ones, and they stay gray. They do not go white like some of the other ones do. So yes, they just clean off. You clean off any of the lichen or any of the growth on there, and they're very easy to read then.
And the D2 product is very good for.
It's very good for
headphones.
them.
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Good. And Carol, I wanted to take this moment to apologize. We didn't recognize you at first with Cindy when we got the award written out. It was just an oversight on our part, so we apologize for that. But
That's fine, not a
we were
problem.
able to get the certificate and get everything else recognized for you. So thank you. So that's for the initiative award. Second, we have Rose, and I'm going to maybe pronounce it right, but Kasperkoski.
Yes. Very good.
Very
And
good.
Russell.
And her husband Russ for their work on the Charles Jacob House, or also known as I think they had another name before it besides that. It's located on Delhaven Road. It was built around 1711. It was restored to its natural state by 1978. I know you both have taken it further in what was done back in the 70s. Charles Jacob was an owner who had tried to recognize a historic place, chemical dating of the logs. The house indicate the building was built between 1711 and 1715, make it one of the oldest homes in Northampton County, if not the oldest home. Documented to precede the Gary Cottage in Nazareth, built by the Moravians in 1740. Charles Jacobs bought the home in 71, began the restoration. He was able to uncover traces of early American history buried within the walls and floors. Once he was about to date the home, getting it registered from the National Register of Historic Places became easy. So this is for the Architectural Award for the Preservation Award for 2021. So why don't you both tell us about what you guys have done to the house since you bought it and since you came upon it?
Well, as you said, Charlie Jacobs, started it back in the 70s. It was more or less an abandoned house that that the kids played in, the local kids, and then the parents boarded it up because you could see from the attic right down into the basement. It was pretty well dilapidated by the time Charlie took it over. We're really only the latest tenders in here in its evolution. After Charlie Jacobs, there was a couple in here. Jill Fry lived in here, and she gets an awful lot of credit for the interior and taking that to the next step where it was actually livable to in some respect. Kept the 6/6 true pane windows, and she did a lot with the flooring, the kitchen, and at some point, Jill and her partner I guess they got tired, and it, like any project of this magnitude, taking it from what it was to what it could be. We're just the latest ones. What we mostly concentrated on, Charlie didn't finish the pointing on that would be the east side and also the south side of the stone. So that was all pointed. The fireplaces more or less just looked like rubble. And so the fireplaces had to be rebuilt. Now, luckily we had a friend who's a very good mason. He's out in Hawaii now. He's been in Hawaii for a long time. But he practically lived with us between the pointing on the side of the house and in the back side of the house, and then rebuilding the fireplaces the way they the way they should have been done. And his name was Brian McIntyre, very good mason, and he helped us get all that stonework done correctly. Again, a group effort. We got pictures from Mr. Flowers down the street about the house when it was in mid construction when Charlie was doing it. Ricky Pash, before he passed away, helped us with some of he gave us some pictures when it came to the back porch and how that back porch should be, how big it was, because at the time it didn't have it, but he had pictures from the river pointing up towards the house. It was kind of funny. I had cows in the front and chickens, but it was but you could see the size and the scope. And then once we started digging into it, you got a good rough idea of what that porch looked like and what it originally was. So me and Peter Cooper, carpenter, up here,
One of our neighbors.
helped us recreate what we thought. Now we did a few little touches of our own, because we thought, well, I don't know exactly what it looked like, because we were working off of old photographs, but that was something else. The floors upstairs were still not done. It was kind of, like I said, it was a group effort, a lot of people, a lot of input. As far as we didn't want to change the infrastructure, we didn't want to manipulate what was here in any kind of modern fashion, or if it was unseen. Like when we moved in, there was I had a girlfriend in the basement. Her name was Ashley.
It was a coal furnace.
It was a coal-fired furnace.
And the first year, all he did was he shoveled coal and shoveled snow, and he would have to shovel snow to make room for the coal and then shovel coal. And he just spent the entire winter in the basement. We had no idea how to get a coal furnace started. It's not like you just light a match and it just lights up. It's like you have to get the embers going, and it was what a project.
And it was a summer winter hookup, so we had to keep the furnace going all summer long, the coal furnace going all summer long. So we changed over to oil, and so there were small changes like that that were, like I said, unseen. But you also have to live in the house. Yeah, I would say it was a group effort. Mr. Cory brought us over some.
He was a neighbor.
He was a neighbor. Brought over some documentation from Captain Paul. Captain Paul was the one, when this was a campground area, was rummaging around through the house, and he found some notes. Mr. Cory found some notes on Captain Paul. It was more or less an ROTC fight that they were going to skirmish, that they were going to have between Lafayette and Lehigh, I guess up there, kind of like where Braden's Airport is now. And describing how he was going to. So neighbors would just drop by with little tidbits that they found, around the house, and they would give their input. We had floods down here, 2004, 5, and 6. Never touched this house. And again, old neighbors, ones that were around in 55, 56, when the
55
when the big flood came. They were like, no, Russ, you'll be fine. It only came up to this point. Then I had other neighbors who were panicking. So it was it was a little bit of an adventure. I think that the original farmer or trapper, whoever did the log cabin side of this, knew what he was doing.
He knew exactly where to put the house.
Yeah.
Even the angle, like for the sun in the winter time, the sun shines in and heats it. Like you can really feel the heat from the sun, and then in the summertime it stays cool. It's like it's on an angle. They knew exactly what they were doing back then.
Yeah, we
Really
use lights more in the
amazing.
summertime than we do in the wintertime.
It's
So
Remind me again, what was the date that house was built?
1711. Yeah.
1711?
The log side, they had the logs carbon dated
Charlie Jacobs did back in the 70s.
back to 1711.
He found original horsehair.
I think that down at the Hunter Martin Museum, We have some pictures of the house and maybe some newspaper articles.
Yes, you do. Mhm.
Yeah.
I mean, thanks to Libby Bush, that she was instrumental in.
Well, maybe Rosie's mom might have had something. to do with
Yes,
it.
I think so too. Yes.
So we're just one in a long chain of people contributing, to keeping this place standing, and I don't know if we could take all the credit.
No, we can't.
there were a lot of hands helping us, and people like Libby, making sure that it's and like Charlie, making sure that that it isn't lost, that the records aren't lost, that the property isn't lost. Hopefully that by the time we move, that the next people will
Appreciate
understand,
it and appreciate it.
and appreciate it for what it
For
is.
sure. We love it.
Good. Congratulations. It looks
Thank
like a
you.
really beautiful home from the photos that we had. Thank you for sharing them.
Thank
But you're always welcome.
Well, I will be stopping by. So just about this
Good.
day. And then finally, we have Larry Cory, who won for the Special Focus Award, presented to an individual who has shown exemplary actions in saving or conserving tradition or body of knowledge and contributes to educational information. Larry this year worked on compiling statistics and historical information on a book entitled Bangor Slater's Football History from 1919 to 1988. He took this documentation to the present as he's taking the documentation further to the present, continuing the book with gathering certificates and recording the school's football history from 1989 to the current. The book conserves archival and documented information for future generations to reflect upon. It shows patience and guidance every step of the way and making a huge success, and something that people can really look back on for the sports in the Slate Belt. So Larry, why don't you go ahead and tell us about the book a little bit?
Okay, well, first of all, thanks for the award. I really do appreciate it. And very impressed with the first two people who went. Wished I could participate in your projects as well. I sound very interesting. This I actually started in 1988. It kind of evolved in an unusual sort of way. I was writing sports for the press. I got to know a gentleman by the name of Ray Pavin, who was associated with Paul Farnan, Bangor's football coach. And he kept stats, I kept stats, others kept stats. And one thing led to another. We wanted to know what kind of records people had set in the past. And that sort of led me on a trip of finding information, statistics, records. A gentleman by the name of Louis Giannetti had done some work. I was privy to have that. Frank Scagliotta had also done a little work. So I got his stuff. But the big thing was to go back in history. And so I went to the Bangor Public Library, and fortunately, they have most of the old Bangor Daily News on microfilm, almost every issue. And from there, I was able to gather a lot of information, not everything, because there had been fires or floods or whatever at various times, and some of these papers were damaged. So from there, I went to the Easton Public Library and looked at old copies of the Easton Express. And I also had looked at yearbooks and scrapbooks and a whole variety of things. So that's how it got started. Since then, I've done others. In fact, the lady here talked about the pandemic and having time to research. So I spent a lot of time this past year online looking at archived copies of the Morning Call, and then some papers called the Allentown Leader, the Allentown Democrat, which were published simultaneously with this Morning Call, and others. And actually, I found, as strange as it may seem, I found information about Bangor and the Slate Belt in the Philadelphia Inquirer. And so what happened is that there were two local papers. There was a paper called the Penargil Index, which was published from sometime in the late 1870s to the mid 1930s, and then of course the Bangor Daily News. But there were also some other little papers. There was a paper in Portland. East Bangor had a paper. Bangor had a little sports paper. And what these smaller papers did was they would send information to the Philadelphia Inquirer, and then they would just print it verbatim. The interesting thing is that the reporters in those days wrote in first person and were very biased. So if it was the Penargil version of a game, you heard all about the bad things from Bangor, and if the Bangor correspondent reported, you had vice versa. It was just the opposite. So it's kind of interesting. The other interesting thing that connected Bangor with Philly, and a lot of these things I've just found out recently, is that Bangor and Penargil could go directly to Philadelphia by train and trolley. And they actually played down there and had home and home games. Philadelphia teams actually played in Bangor on Flory's Field, which is no longer, well, it's a little bit of a little league field now, but, and then I found that there were some women's teams, professional women's teams that played at Flory's. There were some, the Negro leagues. In fact, there were a couple of players who are now in the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, New York, who actually played at Flory's Field. So I mean, it's just fascinating to go back and see all the things that happened, why it happened, the connection of Slate to sports. Because when the Slate industry was, Melissa, you can check me if I'm wrong here, but I think hit its peak in the early 1900s financially. And that's when a lot of these community teams started. And they were financed by the Slate Industries or the quarry owners. And so you can make a direct correlation between the economy of the Slate industry and the growth of community sports. And community sports eventually gave rise to high school sports and so on. I just did this one. I just finished this book. This is the Bangor Penargil football rivalry. And Bangor, they just had their 100th game 2 years ago. I wanted to do this 2 years ago, so I'm actually a little late, but very interesting. It's just going back and I could go on forever. And then the other things I found that are not related to sports, just by going back and in the archives of the Morning Call. There was a guy from Bangor who became the mayor of Philadelphia.
George Mackey.
Mackey, okay.
Yep, George Mackey.
And actually had a church named after him on 2nd Street.
Yep.
In fact, they had bought it. They actually bought it at auction. And there is also found that there's a gentleman buried in St. John Cemetery who was nationally famous back in the early 1900s. He was an All-American football player. He was good friends with Jim Thorpe, became a administrator at Muhlenberg College, and he married a girl from Bangor by the name of Hoffman, whose father was a politician. And anyway, long story short, the gentleman, his name was Haps Benfer, B-E-N-F-E-R, and he is buried in St. John Cemetery. A nationally famous guy. It's surprising that he would be buried in a small town like Bangor. But anyway, that's, without going on and boring you all to death, that's pretty much the short version.
Oh, sounds like a very interesting project, gathering all the certificates and statistics and of all the football teams.
Right, yes, it was. Some
Yeah.
statistics were just missing.
Especially in the newspapers. I didn't know that. I live up in East Bangor, but I didn't know they had a newspaper. So
They did for a very short period of time. I think it was around 1879, maybe, something like that.
interesting. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions for the award winners at all from the other groups or anything? No?
Just a quick comment, and I think it was put beautifully that we are all, kind of the stewards of the material of the house, of the information, and that it's maybe up to us, and you all have done this so beautifully, that you've pulled things together, the information together, so that, you know, we're in some ways leaving it in better shape than how we received it, so that we can pass it along to future generations. And, you know, thank you all for doing that and being great examples of what we should do.
Yes. Yes, congratulations all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, with that, I guess we will end our recording, and thank you all very much.
Okay, you're
you.
quite welcome.